and detectives have been searching for a blue tennis bag that went missing from the McCann's holiday apartment. The bag belonged to Jerry McCann. He'd been playing tennis in the hours before his daughter vanished.
If it's a bag of a size that could be taken away from the flat, a child, that would be of great interest to the investigating officer.
On the night of May 3rd, 2007, in the quiet resort town of Praia da Luz, Portugal, a 3-year-old girl vanished without a trace. Her name was Madeleine McCann. What should have been a peaceful family holiday turned into one of the most chilling mysteries of the 21st century. Nearly 2 decades later, the case continues to captivate, confuse, and disturb. From the very first hours, investigators were faced with contradictions. A holiday apartment filled with unanswered questions, photographs that raised more suspicion than clarity, and testimonies that shifted with time. But among all the strange and unsettling details, 2 stand out, like silent witnesses refusing to be ignored: a mysterious blue tennis bag and a fragment of DNA found in the trunk of a rented car. The bag appeared in police photographs taken inside apartment 5A on the very night Madeleine disappeared. Large, dark blue, unremarkable at first sight, but large enough to hold tennis rackets, or something far darker. Days later, it was gone. The McCanns denied ever owning such a bag. Their spokesman insisted nothing was missing. Yet cadaver dogs later alerted to that very wardrobe where the bag had been stored, signaling the scent of human decomposition. Weeks after Madeleine vanished, another clue emerged. In the trunk of a Renault Scenic hired by the McCanns 25 days later, forensic teams detected DNA partially matching Madeleine's profile. Not a complete match, not conclusive, but not irrelevant either. Forensic science rarely speaks in absolutes, but whispers of death lingered in both the apartment and the car. If no one owned the bag, why was it in the photograph? If it held nothing, why did it vanish? If the car never carried a body, why the scent of death? These are not questions built on fantasy, but on documented evidence, photographs, scientific reports, and the alerts of highly trained dogs. And so, the story begins, not with wild theories, but with traces left behind, evidence that refuses to stay silent. In the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, silence is everywhere, but the evidence whispers louder than words. Inside apartment 5A, just hours after Madeleine McCann was reported missing, Portuguese police snapped photographs of the scene. Among the images, one detail stood out: a large blue sports bag tucked into the wardrobe. At first, it appeared ordinary, perhaps part of the family's holiday luggage. But in the weeks and months that followed, that bag would become one of the most haunting symbols of this case. The bag was large enough to hold tennis rackets, shoes, or other sports gear. Jerry McCann had been playing tennis that very day, so the assumption seemed natural. Yet when pressed, both Jerry and Kate McCann denied ever owning such a bag. Their family spokesman, Clarence Mitchell, reinforced the denial publicly, stating firmly that the family had not returned from holiday missing any luggage. It was as if the bag that appeared in the official police photographs had never existed at all. But the photographs do not lie. There it was, documented, time-stamped, undeniable. And yet, days later, the bag vanished. It was never logged into evidence. It never reappeared in any police inventory. And no one connected to the McCanns acknowledged its existence. A bag once seen, then gone forever. The story became even more tangled when detectives interviewed David Payne, a friend of the McCanns and member of the so-called Tapas 7, the group of friends who dined with the couple on the night Madeleine disappeared. Payne admitted that Jerry owned sports bags, but he described them as small, not large enough to carry a tennis racket. His description clashed directly with the photograph. The bag in the wardrobe was not small. It was large, capacious, easily big enough to hold rackets, or something far more disturbing. So, why the discrepancy? Was Payne simply mistaken, or was he minimizing the significance of what investigators had seen? For detectives already suspicious of inconsistencies, this contradiction only deepened the mystery. Then came the dogs. In August 2007, 2 specially trained British sniffer dogs were brought into Portugal to assist the investigation. Eddie, trained to detect the chemical scent of human decomposition, alerted with unnerving precision in several locations. One of those alerts was in the wardrobe of apartment 5A. the very place where the blue bag had been photographed. His partner Keela, trained to detect traces of human blood, also signaled in the apartment. The implications were chilling. Eddie's alert suggested that something carrying the scent of death had been inside that wardrobe. Could it have been the bag? Did the bag contain Madeleine's body, even for a short period of time, before being removed? Or was Eddie's reaction a false positive? Cadaver dogs are powerful tools, but their findings must be supported by physical evidence. Still, the timing and location of his alerts matched too closely with the bag's mysterious presence and disappearance to be dismissed as coincidence. Investigators speculated that the bag might have served as a temporary hiding place for Madeleine's body. Placed in the wardrobe, it would have been hidden from plain sight during those first chaotic hours after her disappearance. The heat of the Algarve, however, made such concealment risky. In 40°C conditions, decomposition sets in rapidly. If the bag had indeed been used in this way, it would have left behind the traces Eddie detected. But if that was true, why did the bag vanish? Was it deliberately removed to destroy evidence? Could it have been transferred to another location, perhaps even to the Renault Scenic later hired by the McCanns? These questions were never pursued with urgency. The early crime scene management in Portugal was chaotic at best. Journalists, locals, and even curious onlookers were allowed to enter apartment 5A in the early hours, contaminating potential evidence. This failure left room for crucial items to disappear without accountability. By the time investigators realized the potential importance of the bag, it was already gone. The blue bag became a ghostly presence in the investigation, a specter caught on camera but denied by those closest to the case. Its absence created a paradox. If the bag wasn't theirs, why not simply identify its rightful owner? If it belonged to someone else, why was it in their wardrobe? If it was irrelevant, why did it vanish? Every answer raised more questions, and every denial seemed to clash with the silent evidence of the photographs. Online forums, journalists, and independent investigators seized on the mystery. Theories grew. Perhaps the bag was used to transport Madeleine's body from the apartment to another location before the police descended on the resort. Others argued it could have been an innocent piece of luggage, unrelated to the case, and its disappearance the result of sloppy police work rather than conspiracy. Yet, the cadaver dog's alert inside that wardrobe refused to fade from memory. Dogs like Eddie and Keela had been used successfully in homicide cases across Europe. Their reliability, while not absolute, had been proven time and again. To many observers, Eddie's reaction was not something that could be brushed aside with simple denials. The bag's disappearance and the dog's alerts together wove a thread of doubt that has never been untangled. It transformed an ordinary item of luggage into a haunting symbol, not because of what was proven, but because of what was left unanswered. In criminal cases, it is often not the evidence itself, but the contradictions surrounding it that cast the longest shadow. The blue tennis bag, denied by the family, absent from inventories, but immortalized in photographs, remains one of those shadows. If it was meaningless, why did it disappear? If it was innocent, why was its existence denied? And if it was nothing more than luggage, why did the scent of death linger in the space where it once sat? These questions continue to haunt the story of Madeleine McCann, and the blue tennis bag remains a silent witness, perhaps the most haunting of all. 25 days after Madeleine McCann's disappearance, her parents rented a silver Renault Scenic. On the surface, it was a practical decision. Stranded in Portugal, the family needed a vehicle to move between interviews, police stations, and the search for their missing daughter. Yet this ordinary family car would soon become one of the most controversial pieces of evidence in the case. By September 2007, the Portuguese police, working alongside British forensic teams, announced that traces of DNA had been found in the boot of the Renault Scenic. 15 out of 19 genetic markers matched Madeleine's profile. It was not a complete match, but close enough to send shockwaves through the investigation. The evidence was reported as inconclusive by the UK's Forensic Science Service, but newspapers quickly sensationalized it. Some tabloids even claimed a 100% match, igniting a storm of suspicion. The science told a more complicated story. The DNA sample was mixed, meaning it contained material from multiple individuals. It was also degraded, raising doubts about whether it could be used to prove Madeleine had ever been inside the car. And yet, the proximity of the match, 15 markers out of 19, was too strong to ignore. Then came the dogs. The same cadaver dog, Eddie, and blood dog, Keela, that had searched apartment 5A were brought to the Renault Scenic. Eddie alerted to the boot and the driver's door, signaling the presence of human decomposition. Keela indicated traces of human blood in the boot. Two dogs, two separate signals, in the same place where the DNA was later found. The implications were deeply unsettling. In Portugal's searing summer heat, temperatures reaching 40 degrees, decomposition would occur rapidly. For a body to leave detectable traces in a vehicle hired nearly a month after Madeleine vanished suggested something extraordinary. Cadaverine, the chemical byproduct of decomposition, begins to form within hours of death. It clings to fabric, carpets, and surfaces, resisting cleaning. For traces to be found weeks later in the Renault, investigators reasoned the body must have been preserved and then moved at a later date. This theory was advanced by Gonçalo Amaral, the Portuguese lead investigator, in his book, The Truth of the Lie. He drew parallels to a 2005 case in Porto, where a child's body had been frozen to delay decomposition. Amaral argued that the Renault Scenic evidence pointed to refrigeration. In his view, Madeleine may have died on May 3rd, her body hidden in the infamous blue bag inside the apartment wardrobe, then later preserved in a refrigerator before finally being transferred to the car. Supporting this idea were conflicting explanations given by members of the McCann family about the car's smell. Jerry's brother-in-law, Alexander Cameron, claimed in a 2008 police statement that the odor in the Renault came from leaking supermarket meat, shrimp, and fish. He described removing the boot carpet and scrubbing it clean. Kate's cousin, Michael Wright, offered a different explanation. The smell came from discarded nappies stored in rubbish bags. Both acknowledged a strong odor, but neither explanation convinced investigators. Cadaver dogs like Eddie do not confuse rotting food or diapers with human remains. Forensic science further undermined these claims. While the sample was mixed, the markers most consistent with Madeleine's DNA leaned far closer to her than to her siblings, Amélie and Sean. The chance of contamination from casual items was not impossible, but unlikely. Moreover, no receipts or photos corroborated the alleged supermarket spill or the diaper story. Why, detectives asked, would the family go to such lengths to clean the boot if the smell had such an innocent cause? The Renault Scenic thus became a forensic battlefield. On one side, the partial DNA match, the cadaver dog's alerts, and the blood detection created a troubling narrative. On the other, the family's denials, alternative explanations, and the inconclusive wording of forensic reports provided just enough doubt to avoid a definitive conclusion. Still, the timeline made the scenario incredibly risky. Moving a body 25 days after the disappearance, in a town crawling with journalists, locals, and police, would have required extraordinary secrecy. Praia da Luz was under relentless scrutiny. Reporters camped outside the McCann's villa. Every move was photographed, every visitor noted. How could such a transfer take place unnoticed? Yet the evidence in the Renault demanded some explanation. Why did cadaver and blood dogs alert to the same car? Why did DNA so close to Madeleine's profile appear in its boot? Why did the family members' accounts of the smell diverge so dramatically? Skeptics suggested simpler answers. Perhaps Madeleine's belongings had been transferred in the car, her clothes, her toys, even the cuddle cat Kate carried everywhere. Secondary transfer could explain the DNA. But cadaverine, the chemical that triggered Eddie's alerts, could not come from toys or clothing. It comes only from decomposing human tissue. The hypothesis of refrigeration, though disturbing, offered one possible solution. If Madeleine's body had been stored in a fridge, decomposition would have slowed, odors contained. Only later, when transferred to the Renault, would faint traces of cadaverine have been left behind. Amaral and his team even searched for a mysterious apartment with a cooling unit, though he was removed from the case before the lead could be pursued. The McCanns, for their part, dismissed the dog alerts outright, questioning their reliability. They framed the DNA as inconclusive and explained away the smell, yet their refusal to address the contradictions directly fueled further suspicion. Why not embrace the tests as potential leads in finding their daughter? Why dismiss them unless they pointed to a truth too dangerous to confront? In the court of law, the evidence was not enough. The DNA was partial, the dogs not admissible without corroboration. No body was ever found. The Renault Scenic was returned, cleaned, and eventually sold. But in the court of public opinion, the damage was done. For many observers, the Renault became a symbol of unanswered questions, an ordinary car that carried extraordinary suspicions. Nearly 2 decades later, the Renault Scenic remains etched into the memory of this case. A family car turned into a forensic firestorm. It represents not proof, but the persistence of shadows. Shadows that whisper of a chain connecting the missing blue bag, the wardrobe of apartment 5A, and the boot of a silver car. And just like the bag, the Renault Scenic stands as an enigma. Was it a coincidence? Was it contamination? Or was it the final vessel in a sequence too disturbing to fully imagine? What remains clear is this. In the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, even the most ordinary objects, a bag, a wardrobe, a car, become silent witnesses. And sometimes, silence is louder than any confession. As investigators dug deeper into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, the evidence trail was not the only thing raising questions. Beyond the blue tennis bag and the Renault Scenic, it was the behavior of those closest to Madeleine that cast long, unsettling shadows. In September 2007, both Kate and Jerry McCann were named arguidos, formal suspects under Portuguese law. During questioning, Kate McCann refused to answer 48 direct police questions. These were not obscure or irrelevant queries. They were basic, vital details. Why was there no sign of forced entry into apartment 5A? What exactly did Kate do after discovering Madeleine was gone? Why would Madeleine not have cried out if a stranger had entered the room? Each unanswered question deepened suspicion. To the public, a mother's silence in such a moment was hard to reconcile with the image of desperation usually seen in grieving parents. Equally troubling was the couple's approach to the investigation outside the police station. Rather than opening themselves to every possible lead, they seemed intent on narrowing the narrative. Within weeks, the McCanns had assembled a team of high-profile lawyers, crisis managers, and a full-time spokesperson, Clarence Mitchell. Their media strategy was polished, disciplined, and unwavering. Madeleine had been abducted. Any suggestion otherwise was dismissed as offensive, conspiratorial, or malicious. This rigid narrative control reached into courtrooms as well. The McCanns pursued legal action against Gonçalo Amaral, the lead investigator who later published The Truth of the Lie, a book arguing that Madeleine had died in the apartment and her death had been concealed. The lawsuit sought to ban the book and claim damages, but in doing so, it broadcast to the world the extremes to which the couple would go to silence alternate theories. To some, this looked like grieving parents protecting their reputation. To others, it looked like narrative management, a shield against uncomfortable truths. Then, there were the photographs. Police records revealed that the McCanns submitted 74 images from their holiday in Praia da Luz. These photos could have helped investigators reconstruct Madeleine's last known days, identify who was present, and establish timelines. Yet, shockingly, 71 of the 74 images had been heavily cropped or edited. Entire backgrounds blacked out, faces obscured, details erased. This level of manipulation rendered the majority of the collection almost useless for investigation. What was being hidden? A person? An object? Could it have been the now infamous blue bag? No explanation for the edits was ever made public. Even the family's social interactions raised eyebrows. Weeks after Madeleine's disappearance, the McCanns were photographed dining with Sir Clement Freud, a well-known public figure in the UK, who was posthumously accused of inappropriate behavior with minors. At that dinner, jokes were allegedly made about cadaver dogs searching for sausages. To many observers, this levity in the midst of such a tragedy felt chillingly out of place. And then there was the question of urgency. In the immediate aftermath of Madeleine's disappearance, reports emerged that Kate had initially refused to take part in the physical search. Jerry claimed he had searched, but others could not confirm his presence. For parents of a missing 3-year-old, such passivity struck many as unnatural. Grief manifests differently, yes, but the absence of visible, frantic urgency unsettled even seasoned investigators. Their efforts to find Madeleine also took unexpected turns. At one point, the McCanns distributed missing person flyers not in Portugal, but in Huelva, Spain, nearly 200 kilometers away. The move puzzled authorities and the public alike. There was no evidence, no sightings, no leads linking Madeleine to that location. Was it a symbolic gesture, a diversion, or something more? Without explanation, it became another loose thread in a tapestry of contradictions. The contradictions extended to the Tapas 7, the group of friends dining with the McCanns the night Madeleine vanished. Their statements about timelines, who checked on the children, at what times, and what they saw, shifted over the course of the investigation. Jane Tanner, for example, initially reported seeing a man carrying a child near the apartment at 9:15 p.m., but her description later changed. David Payne's previous comments, reported by friends, about children were considered deeply inappropriate, yet these details reached Portuguese authorities only months later, weakening their value. Taken separately, any one of these incidents might be explained away as stress, trauma, or coincidence. But together, they formed a troubling pattern. Silence when answers were needed most. Rigid narrative control when openness might have built trust. Edited photographs where clarity was essential. Humor when gravity demanded seriousness. Inconsistencies where certainty was required. In the absence of clear forensic proof, behavior often becomes the lens through which guilt or innocence is perceived. Forensic psychologists often note that innocent parents of missing children tend to overshare, cooperate fully, and explore every possibility, however painful. They leave no stone unturned because the one stone left unturned could mean their child remains lost. In contrast, the McCanns constructed boundaries, legal, narrative, and emotional, that appeared to block certain avenues rather than pursue them. This is not evidence of guilt in a court of law, but in the court of public opinion, it planted seeds of doubt that continue to grow. To many, what was missing was not just a child, but also the unmistakable rawness of parental grief, the urgency, the unfiltered desperation, the willingness to answer anything, try anything, face anything to bring a child home. In Madeleine McCann's case, the silences, the contradictions, and the carefully managed story became part of the evidence itself. And like the missing blue bag and the Renault Scenic, they remain unanswered questions that refuse to fade. 17 years have passed since Madeleine McCann vanished from apartment 5A in Praia da Luz. Yet the questions raised in those first hours have never gone away. If anything, time has only magnified the contradictions, the mysteries, and the uneasy silences. The blue tennis bag, captured in a police photograph, then denied, then gone, remains one of the most haunting symbols of the case. If it was just luggage, why deny it existed? If it belonged to someone else, why not clarify? And if it was irrelevant, why did it vanish without trace? The bag became more than an object. It became a question mark etched into the heart of the investigation, a silent witness whose absence spoke louder than words. Then there was the Renault Scenic, a family car, rented weeks after Madeleine's disappearance, transformed into a forensic storm. The cadaver dog's alerts in the boot and the driver's door. The blood dog's detection of biological traces. The DNA sample that matched 15 of 19 markers. All of it raised suspicions that have never been fully explained. Science did not declare certainty, but it did not absolve either. Instead, it whispered of something disturbing, something that resisted easy answers. Beyond the evidence, the behaviors of those closest to Madeleine deepened the fog. 48 police questions left unanswered. 71 out of 74 holiday photographs altered beyond use. A media machine built with lawyers and crisis managers, designed not only to tell a story, but to control it. Dinners with public figures, jokes about cadaver dogs, and sudden shifts in witness testimony added layer upon layer of contradiction. Each element alone might not be damning, but together they created a mosaic of doubt, a pattern not of proof, but of shadows. And in criminal investigations, shadows matter. They reveal where light has not been allowed to fall. The lesson of this case is not only about the fate of one child. It is about how truth can be obscured, intentionally or unintentionally, by silence, by contradiction, by control. It is about how public perception can be shaped not by evidence, but by narrative, by who speaks first and loudest, and by which questions are silenced. It is about how the absence of clarity becomes a kind of evidence in itself. Even now, Madeleine McCann's disappearance remains officially unsolved. No one has been charged. No body has been found. No confession has been made. Yet the case refuses to fade because the gaps are too large, the inconsistencies too glaring, the silences too heavy. In the end, the story of Madeleine McCann is not only about a missing child, it is about what goes missing around her, missing answers, missing honesty, missing accountability, a bag that disappears, DNA that cannot be explained, questions that are never answered, photographs that are altered, records that are doubted. Each absence leaves a scar on the investigation until the case itself feels less like a puzzle and more like a void. And so, we are left with two haunting questions that still hang in the air. If no tennis bag was ever missing, then what was the one seen in the wardrobe on May 3rd, 2007? And if the DNA in the Renault Scenic did not belong to Madeleine, then whose was it? The truth may never come in the form of a signed confession or a dramatic revelation. It may only emerge piece by piece from contradictions that cannot be reconciled. Sometimes justice is not about answers, but about refusing to stop asking the questions others want buried. Madeleine McCann was 3 years old when she vanished. That fact is the only certainty. The rest is a fog of silence, contradiction, and suspicion. And in that fog, the world continues to search, not only for a child, but for the truth that has been missing ever since.